a podcast about amazing people from an incredible state. Join Mike Broomhead for Amazing Arizonans, presented by Resolution Copper. Copper is essential to Arizona's economy and to America's future. Learn more at resolutioncopper.com.
You know, the whole goal of this Amazing Arizonans podcast are just that, Amazing Arizonans. The stories about specifically Arizona. And it doesn't get much more specifically Arizona than our next guest, Tom Hatten, Mountainside Fitness. I can't wait to hear the story. I know we've talked about this.
How much time do we have?
Well, as much, that's what's great about podcasts, as much as we want. But let's go back. You're an ASU guy.
Ish.
That's semester. The part of it I love. That's what I love about the story.
Yeah.
You were at ASU, and what happened?
Well, you know, it's funny when now I go back and I talk to ASU students, and I say, you only need one semester. Other than that,
the university's got to love that.
After that, yeah, they do. It really did. I went to 2 years of junior college, and then it was time to move up to ASU and enrolled in the education, programs there, and then everything just turned crazy when I got this dream one day I was going to open a gym, and it was out of nowhere.
What's funny about it, and if you don't know Mountainside Fitness, they are kind of the industry standard here in town, in the state of Arizona. They are upscale. They're different than the other places. They're unique. But if you don't know that industry, you do now more than most people. It's not an easy industry to break into. You can be one small, tiny gym for weightlifters in a neighborhood, but to try to compete with LA Fitness and some of the other organizations, not an easy task. You found that out the hard way.
I found out the hard way. It was interesting because I wasn't a fitness guy. I mean, I played sports just like you, and I both kind of grew up the same way. And working out was something you did in, advanced PE in gym, right? And there was really hardcore, Gold's World's Physique Southwest back in Arizona, back in the days here. And then country clubs. And there wasn't really anything in between. So after my first semester at ASU, or I started in the spring, I passed out one night after painting houses. I was painting my way through college, literally. And I woke up with this dream that I was going to own a gym, and it was really random. Like, I just never really thought about that at all, and started chasing it. The unique part about it was it was 1990 when that started. Fitness was just nothing, really, just like I said. It was just, so it allowed me to kind of mold my own fitness center, gym at the time, to whatever it wanted to be, because there just wasn't any competition until later.
But what were those beginning days like in your mind? Was it a small little location in a strip mall? Was it a freestanding big building with all the equipment? What was the original dream?
So it was small, and it was interesting because it was really small, and it was me standing at this front desk, right, and kind of looking around, and the carpet was gray, the equipment was white, it had black upholstery, the locker rooms, if you want to call them that, were in the back. I had this little childcare, which there wasn't childcare back then, so that was weird, right? I was only 22 at the time, so kids weren't even in my brain. And then it was, it used to be called aerobics room on the side, and that was it. And lo and behold, really 6-7 months later, when I signed the lease, it was exactly that size, and then we built it out exactly that way.
I know that there's no such thing as an overnight success. And you and I have talked a little bit about those days, and I don't know how much you want to go into it, where you thought, this was the dumbest thing I've ever done. I mean, you were in financial ruin.
Yeah, I was broke. Man, I was like, I had my dog and my truck, and that was it, and I learned how to live on, Lisa and I talk about it on ramen, really, and soup. And
for us, it was the store brand macaroni and cheese.
That's it.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
99 cents a box.
And I ate so I wouldn't be hungry, not because I wanted to eat. Like, I had other things to do, and sleep and eat were, secondary. And I think that was the beginning part. It was just, I had all this energy. There wasn't a lot in front of me, so I could just attack whatever the problems were. And learning was just like this avalanche of everything that was coming on, whether it was competing, learning how to start a business, how to get money, what we were going to be. All those things were like this cloud forming in my head.
You're one of the most positive people I've ever met. I mean, we talk, and you make me laugh as soon as we see each other, we start laughing or smiling. Have you always been that way? Was there ever a time in this process where you thought it's over, or this is going to be a failure, or what have I done? Or have you always been this, it's just one more hurdle to jump over?
I think it's probably was something deep down that I didn't, I was definitely played sports my whole life. My dad was a pretty popular high school football and basketball coach, and he was just always positive and never understood failure. He just didn't, it wasn't in his vocabulary, so therefore it wasn't in mine or my sister's. So there were problems, and there were bigger problems and smaller problems, and there was never going to be no problems. But it didn't mean you couldn't get through them. It was just how. And I think learning and getting confidence in the how has been my whole career, not avoiding them, just going through them.
So was the original location, was it always Mountainside Fitness? And if not, how did it become? How'd you get the name?
It was in Mountainside Plaza. It was up in Ahwatukee, 40th Street and Chandler Boulevard.
Yeah.
And I had still, the shopping center was brand new. The landlord was awesome. His name is Charlie Boyd, and he took a chance on a kid who had no money, and he just said, Tom, I like the idea. I don't know if you're the guy to do this, so we're going to give you, he invested $70,000 in tenant improvements towards this thing, and really just towards a kid. And then my family and I built out the whole club, and he said, if not, give me everything you have. Just like a coach, right? When we were growing up, he goes, give me everything you have, and I won't go after you if it fails, but just leave it all on the field. And that was all I needed.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was Mountainside Plaza.
How did you meet him?
I met him, it was funny. My mom was a residential real estate agent, and when I got this idea in June of 1990, I was like, I gotta look for space. It just kind of morphed into this whole thing that the family all took on together. And so she kind of looked around and found who the broker was for the shopping center, and John Railing. I can't believe I still remember that. And John was great, and he goes, you probably need to meet Charlie to make this happen, because all the normal financials, you don't have any of it. So my mom through John met Charlie, and he was awesome. Like I could never been here without him. Yeah.
When you look at, I moved here in 1995. And the gyms that were around here then were the LA Fitness and some of the other big chains that had a lot of backing, a lot of money behind them. Did you ever feel like you were in competition with them? What was your mindset like with that?
I always felt like I was in competition with everybody.
Okay.
I still feel that way today. Whether it's a yoga studio, whether it's a Weight Watchers commercial, I think we're always competing and trying to make ourselves better. But I just never leave that. Chin started the same time I did. He just had jet fuel, and good for him on that. There was there was Joe Weider. Do you remember Weider?
Of course.
Right? Joe Weider, franchisee, was my number one competitor up in Ahwatukee when I first started. And that was my first shot of what does a national money do to a local guy with no money?
Yeah.
And how do you compete? And that was, I think, the first things I had to figure out in my head, other than just how do we run a gym.
Did you always have visions of what it would become, or were you so involved, were you so close to the forest you couldn't see the trees?
Absolutely the latter in that one. I think I always looked at what is that step right in front of me? What do I want to do? So maybe we'll talk about the towel story.
Yeah, of course.
Or membership appreciation, which were kind of these really unique ideas in the beginning, and that was, if that's what I want to do in this business, how do I do it? And that was my focus. And if I focused on that, then I just moved to the next thing and the next thing, and never really pay attention to how big the staircase was, just, what's the stair in front of me.
So did you ever, or when did you look up? You know what I mean? Look up from what you were building and realize, oh my gosh, this is bigger than I've ever imagined.
I think, after there were so many hurdles, I did run out of money. About 14 months in, I was broke. And my accountant at the time, she goes, you're just going to run out. That Joe Weider came in, and all these things that were happening were just going backwards. And I was like, what do I do now? There's one thing about getting open in a business. I'm sure you've heard a million stories. Then it's how do you stay open? Then it's how do you compete? And then how do you evolve and all those kind of things. So the short answer was I had no idea. I probably didn't really pause for the first 4 years. I don't think I ever really let myself. There wasn't time to.
When you think about your advice to people, because I love the fact that, I love how the story starts, because I know that people in this industry, but in business in general, seek you out for advice. Do you ever wonder why they're asking you for advice?
I think now I understand it, but probably because back in the day I had people that I would turn to for advice, and I think the thing that they had in common with me now was just time, age, experience, going through some success, but more failures to create more success. And what did they do, and how did they think, and how do they deal with competition, and how they deal with growth and financing or anything, real estate, you can go on and on, staff, employees, and I would just lean on them, and just learn to listen more than talk.
But is that the difference between deciding I want to open a business and having a passion for something? Because opening a business, you're going to have challenges and you know it. But when you hit the wall, it's easier to close the doors. If you have a passion, you got to find a way to kick the door down.
You got to go through it. Yeah. I think it goes back to, I was a baseball player. My whole life I wanted to play baseball. You were talking about football.
Yeah.
I think we were the same in that, and that was it. I was just going to play baseball and maybe become an architect, and that was it. And not go just college ball or what have you. And then when that all didn't work out, I thought I knew what I loved. I loved baseball. I just didn't know the difference between loving something and working hard, and then working at a different level hard. And I never looked at failure when I played sports. But when I started Mountainside, I had to recognize failure. Failure was we were going to close. I was going to be really broke and have no plan on what I was going to do next. That was a different mindset than I had anything before. And it just changed the way I just looked at everything, just in function.
Was Arizona, looking back, I moved here in 1995. First time I came here on vacation was 92. Absolutely fell in love. But the people, with the opportunity, this was even then, it was a big town for me, from where I came from. And it just seemed like such an opportunity that when given the opportunity in 95, I felt like if I'm going to have a life, the life I want, that's the place I'm going to have it. Was that for you? Did you feel that way about Arizona, that it was the right place, the economy was ripe for the growth we were going to see in the mid-90s, or was that not even a part of it?
I think it was. My family, moved out here from Minnesota. I was 6 months old. They literally chopped a crib off and put it in the back of a station wagon, and that was where I rode. My two sisters rode up front with $200. My dad took a coaching job at McClintock High School, and so we weren't turning around. And with us kids, and he always said when we were little, the thing that he always attracted him to Arizona compared to Austin, Minnesota, was the potential to grow. And whether it was in his career, for my mom, for us kids, just everything. It was always going to be growing, and he's never been wrong. And I think that's what you saw in 92, and I got to live through my whole life here. It's never stopped.
So we met at, I think it was your 20th anniversary celebration at a big resort, and you went all out. There was an ice bar, and it was a Monte Carlo night for your. But what I saw, and that was the night we met.
Yeah.
But what I thought was you just went all out for your employees. I mean, it wasn't you patting yourself on the back. It was music and a night where it seemed to me as a complete outsider that you were really there thanking the people that got you there, that you really cherished your employees. And at the time, I was an employee, and I thought, man, that's the kind of person I'd run through a wall for. Was that your mindset?
Yeah, it was absolutely. I think, when I first started, well, even today, there were so many employees that were older than me. And, and I learned through sports and stuff, you are a team. I had my role, Sally had her role, John had his role. That was it. And we were all part of the team. I might call this play. You guys might execute it. If we're successful, you guys are going to get the credit for executing it, because that's the hardest part. And I don't think that's ever really left us. It just multiplied. And then more people have got on board that, I think we just bring on like-minded people that way.
When did you, and I'm going to talk about the towel store, I want to talk about these other things that have made you successful. Was there a time or a point where you felt like, all right, now I can make decisions that are not just about keeping the doors open, but they're about growth and about bigger success? Was there a time for you that happened?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. It was 1996. I had already opened my second one. It was bigger. It was huge. It was 13,000 feet. My first one was 4,800 square feet. So at that point, it was huge. But I had moved on, and we did well in that second one. We competed directly against a world gym in Tempe, and that club was failing. And the new one of ours, people were just walking in, and it was great. So I was like, all right, I'm starting to get some things figured out. And it was also at that time that I found my first piece of land, and was secured a loan to build a club. And once that all rolled around in 1996, and I was able to do that, it changed the playbook for me and my confidence level in the company and what we were able to do.
So tell some of these other stories. I mean, I just think because they're fascinating in how they came about and what it did to kind of mold things.
I think you never know what's forming. You know, ever seen the movie Slumdog Millionaire?
Yeah, of course.
I mean, one of the greatest movies I ever thought, because all these things happened in his life that he had no idea, that came to fruition on a game show.
Yeah.
When he's like, all these things, like, I don't remember looking at that, and that was that. That's kind of been my life in the sense of how I grew up, and some of the teachers and coaches and people I was around, friends, and certainly my parents were instrumental. Our family was really close, and I remember when I came to my family and I said, hey, I think I'm going to drop out of ASU and start a gym. And, my dad looked at me like, what the hell are you doing? But really, they didn't really blink. And after they paused a little bit, I explained to them what was going through my head. And, that was kind of the way they came out here, and they kind of lived their lives. So they took it in and sat there, and I think we talked about a week later, and, my dad looked at me and he goes, look, nobody knows anything about gyms. I think we knew about people and treating people, but we don't know about that. But he goes, I do know that we won't let you fail, and that's not going to happen. We're just not going to let it happen. And, you hear that, and then you just put it in your brain and go, all right, it's on, and go for that. To extend that, when we were building out, we got through and got the lease signed, and, my father, my mom, my sister, my grandfather all helped. My uncle helped build out this club. One day we were in there, my dad and I were building this front desk, and he was sawing away. And at the time I was selling memberships. People were walking in to try to buy, I'm trying to paint the picture of what we're building here. I'm a kid full of dust and, paint and, what have you. And my dad's sawing in the back, and he was probably about 20 yards from me, and it was loud, and I was trying to talk to Ray and Linda, and I couldn't tell him to stop. I just couldn't get it out of me. I was like, what have you. Halfway through the conversation, I realized that he had stopped sawing, finished the conversation, looked around, he was gone. Couldn't figure out where he had gone or what have you. I was like, he must have realized that, he needed to stop. However, I looked down on the ground, and there was this trail of blood leading out the back door. I'm like, oh no. Yeah. So I walk out the back, and, there's my dad, and his finger is literally hanging. I could see it hanging off, right? It's hanging. He's got a caulking gun in his hand, and he's got duct tape between his legs. And it was pouring blood, hanging there, and he was taking the caulking and shooting it in to hold the finger together, and he was going to duct tape. And he did. And it was pretty gross. And I looked at him, I'm like, you never yelled, you never cut, like there was nothing I could hear from you. And he doesn't skip a beat, and he's wrapping it full of duct tape. And without even blinking, he looks at me and goes, I didn't want to affect your sale. When you hear those kind of things and the commitment from the beginning, and you see it in action, I mean, running the business and going through whatever I was going to go through next was zero. It was just effort.
Yeah, that's loyalty. That's someone that's focused on the goal.
My mom worked behind the front counter. My sister painted the first logo. My other sister taught group fitness. I mean, it was a family affair. Friends were involved. My roommate and I built some of the equipment. He was great at welding. Mike was great. And then it was just now, how do I start the business? What do you do? Who are we going to be? And, we talked a little bit about towels, and back in those days, there wasn't towels in gyms. You just showed up and that was it. And I wanted to have towels for the members. That was something I felt we could do and control. Problem was, we couldn't afford a laundry service or anything like that. So I was the laundry service. And that's when I learned that sleep was just an option. I would do towels till 2 a.m. I'd wake up at 6. I'd bring them all back. We'd fold them. We'd work all day. And I did that for a year and a half.
What's interesting about that is it is something that we take for granted at the gym now. Right. And honestly, it's one of those amenities that when you go into the gym, you just grab a towel or whatever. But what it took for you to provide it, I think people would appreciate hearing this. When they hear the story, that for us, it was something we wanted to do for our customers. And I would stay up until 2 o'clock in the morning, making sure you had clean towels the next day. But I think that story, for me anyway, getting to know you, kind of summarizes who you are. That the little things that have to be done to make a business successful are just part of it. If you're going to do it, you better accept the fact that it has to be done.
It has to be done. And no is just not, it's just not in the discussion. It's just how. So the how was, all right, I had a little washer and dryer. It's still in our corporate office today. That thing still works. And, you can put about 5 towels in. I bought the towels at Home Depot. They're a little 24 by 20, little one, right? You get about 80 towels for $5. And that was just the thing to do. And I felt like I didn't have anything else. All my equipment was used. It was small space. Now I was competing against big clubs. I could do this, and they weren't, and that I can control. And so how I could formulate more, and all of us as a team could formulate more ways to do things that we can control, and just never stop doing them.
So when you talk to young people, and I know they all want to pick your brain about business, how much of it is about the business side of it, the dollars and cents and the bottom line, and how much of it is those other things, the intangible, do you really have it in you to not fail?
I think it starts with that. I think everything starts with effort and energy and passion. I was lucky. I went from something I loved to something that I loved even more. And few people get that opportunity to do that.
I'm one of them.
You got, right? We're the same in that. And so it didn't really feel like as much work as it did just building something like, whatever. I think it's important to try to figure out as best you can. And if it takes you 50 tries to figure out what you might love, take 49 of them and do that. But love it if you're going to do something like this, a career, because you're gonna have to do things that, and stay up and never sleep and work. And I've learned that there is this weird dynamic. First of all, if you're doing something just for money, then it's a job. But you also have to know your value, so that just because you love it doesn't mean that you should do it for free. That was funny. Charlie said that to me. He goes, "You got to pay yourself, Tom." And I'm like, I can't afford to pay myself. So I would work Monday through Saturday. Saturday afternoon, the club slowed down. I would go paint. And especially if it was an inside house, I could paint dark, and turn the lights on. I would paint on Sundays and do that. And that's how I would pay myself. And really it was about almost 2 years later that I was able to take some money out and do that. So that was a reward. I wanted to make as much as I was going to if I was going to be a teacher. That was my goal in doing that. But effort led to learning, led to not being afraid of the unknown. And then experiencing, going, all right, how do I learn about, I took microeconomics. I didn't take any finance, so I didn't know anything. Most people out there know more than I did as a kid doing that. And I think you have to learn it, but you got to want to.
But if you had done this, if the thought had been put in your brain, or if you had thought, what a great way to make a bunch of money is? Open a gym.
No.
You would have failed early because you were making no money.
That's right.
But then that's the other part of it, is then once you realize you're providing a service for people, you get to do what you love, but there's value in it as well. Am I right about that?
Absolutely. Then it
isn't about the money.
No. That always came. I never even considered that. I just wanted to be open 1 year. That was my goal. 85% of businesses fail in the first year. I wanted it to be in the top 15%. And survive a year, and then maybe make enough money that I would have if I was a teacher, and then whatever, and then it just evolved into that. It couldn't have been. It would. I think that's a low bar for most people.
And I think that the lesson that I had to learn in life is that I'm doing things because I love to do it, and I wouldn't do this. I didn't have the challenges you had in this business, but I wouldn't do this if I didn't love it. But just because I love it doesn't mean that there's not value attached. And how do you attack both of those? I do it because I love it. When I stop loving it, I'll stop doing it. But at the same time, you can't give a gym member. You aren't giving. No. You're not just opening the doors and saying, "Come on in" for nothing.
I think love creates value. It just in everything, right? In our personal lives, in our business life, because it created the value. I loved it, and I believed in what we were going to do or what the idea was, and the value was going to come. I had a low bar for what I needed in the value, but the value was going to come. I just didn't know at what level or in what direction. I just knew it was going to come. Just keep going.
When did, what instilled in you the sense of community? And I'll tell you why I'm asking this question. When COVID happened, your industry was hit as harder than just about any other industry because you couldn't open. You had bills to pay with all of your buildings. You had staff that you had to pay with all these other things going on. Not only did you survive that, but you opened your clubs for exams and for the other things that were needed. You opened your doors at a time when financially it was kicking you in the butt.
That's correct. I think it harkens all the way back to the beginning because when we talked about a little bit of opening up and competitors and stuff like that, one of the reasons that got us through when we were going to fail was the loyalty of the employees. So that it wasn't the shiny new nickel that they were going to grab off the ground. They stayed because they enjoyed their job, and I think they enjoyed being around our atmosphere and some of the things that we were creating. Flash forward 30 years later, and I don't think that, I think it just magnified. And my team has been unbelievable and went from, 20 back in 1992, to 2000 now. That's a lot of support that allows, you to be able to go do things because they're supportive of it. And we're all a family and a team on it. And that morphed into how do we support Arizona if we're going to stand up to do some things different, which happened during COVID. Are we in as a team? And that was a unanimous yes. It was really awesome.
So let's talk about that switch, because I know that you were all in testing centers and making sure that you were available and that whatever the best practices were, I know that you had helped with what are the rules for reopening to make sure it's done safely. And you were you volunteering to give all of this input and everything else. And then you found out you were shutting down a second time. I remember, at least for me, a switch kind of flipped. And I saw a side of you. I saw the defiant side of you and the what in the world's going on side of you. Will you talk a little bit about that, of what happened? Because you had been, in my view, you had been such a good citizen about this. I'm losing my shirt here, but this is what we're doing together. We're in this together. Open the doors as testing centers, whatever we need to do to be better. If we're going to reopen, I'll be a part of whatever we have to do. And then what happened? Well,
I think there was always this communication between the governor's office and myself and other people, in the Valley, in that. And I think I took it as, I would say, a little bit of a betrayal, but a betrayal of not only what we were as a health community, so to speak, but just as a business community, and how everybody had kind of jumped in, really all in the first shutdown. And I don't just mean myself or, fitness, but all these businesses.
I remember.
Everybody was doing the same thing, honestly, sincerely together. And then I think it just morphed into more of a political thing, not really a health thing. And there's so many things that were happening behind the scenes that I could go on and on. We could talk for hours on what was going on. As that was getting louder and we knew that it was coming, that defiant part, as my dad said, don't ever mistake kindness for weakness. Mm-hmm. And I think that part came out and said, hey, we did everything and then some, and this is just wrong. So I'm just going to lean into it. We're going to stand up for, against what was wrong.
And I think what gives you credibility in that, again, just my view, is that you were a part of
yes.
everything that was happening. People were, I don't care what anybody says, it was a blind effort because it was something we had never seen in our lifetime. So people didn't know what the best defense against this was. What we wanted to do was best practices. So everybody was saying, we're going to do our best, not exactly knowing exactly what needed to be done. But you were a part of that entire effort.
It was interesting. Here's a good story. If you want, my son at the time, he was in his senior year at U of A. Obviously, U of A gets shut down. He's going through, what all the kids were going through.
My niece was a senior in high school and didn't graduate with a class.
He was the same. Brady was the same. And we were sitting there on a Sunday and everything, we had already had the shutdown, getting ready to open up. And then all this stuff was going to happen. And he cornered me when it was Sunday afternoon. He goes, you got to do something. He goes, you're in a position to where you got to do something. He was really emotional, passionate about it. He goes, you got to do something. And I said, okay. And I called Sandra Watson at the governor's office, and Sandra and I go way back. And I said, okay, what can we do? And she goes, can you get the business community together to write a list of protocols? You know, the governor's office, we don't know exactly what movie theaters need to reopen as far as retail, as far as health clubs and so forth. Can you try to get as many people together?
And what's funny, I'm sorry to interrupt, just thinking about the fitness industry, sweating, the breathing heavy when people thought it was airborne,
right?
Touching equipment and sharing equipment, all things that are different. I mean, at the grocery store, they had one-way aisles and touching stuff was a concern. Your business seemed at the time like everything you're not supposed to do is happening in a gym. It turned out not to be that way, but that was what people were thinking.
Isn't that funny? And the thing that you needed to do to be able to stave off any kind of, flu, forget about COVID, but just anything in general, was to be stronger, healthy.
Correct.
Right? Have better heart, blood capacity, all that kind of oxygen capacity. So we get this call, and everybody, you would have been so proud, Mike, to be on that call, because every name you can imagine in that grew up or did something in this town, whether it was the restaurant industry, whether it was the sports industry, I can go on and on. There was 50 of us on the call that was orchestrated inside of 3 days, representing 2 million Arizona. Like, it was crazy, all on a Zoom call, all talking about, and we all went break. And we all went back and wrote protocols and submitted them to the governor's office. That's why I got a little bit more personal, because when, we were about ready to reopen and we had the protocols, we're like, hey, we're doing what you asked us to do. And now, and then it got, it changed with the closing the second time. I think that made it even deeper, because we donated to the COVID relief fund. We did all that kind of stuff, and then did the protocols and got everybody together, and everybody was like, let's go. We're all in this together. And then we weren't, not because the team of Arizonans and the business communities weren't, but because I think the politics had changed, and that really didn't go well.
Yeah, and I remember those conversations that you and I had privately, and I know that you had, and I don't know what it's like now, and I don't know if it's anybody's business, but I know you had a good rapport and a good relationship with the governor at the time.
Yes.
And I've said about a lot of things about how this state has changed for the good in the past decade because of a lot of those decisions that he made.
Yep.
But I consider you a friend, and I know that you personally felt like I've been involved in doing the right thing, and now all of a sudden politics comes in, and the right thing doesn't seem to matter anymore. Now it matters what's politically expedient. Is that a fair assessment?
You're right on. And there was a relationship before that, and I think that all that added up to it, right? And then you all these things, and back to the Slumdog Millionaire thing of all the different parts of the career, and just trying to look at things through different lenses and stuff like that, and trying to go, okay, I actually think Governor Ducey did a good job up until that point, and I like Doug, but at that point in that decision tree, I did not agree with it. And for all the scenarios, try to deal with it behind the scenes, and that wasn't happening. So then I had to take it public.
Do you want to talk about your political considerations? Do you want to go down that road at all about what you thought about doing?
We could do that maybe a little bit. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
but I think that's a part of this, that what I've learned about you over the years of getting to know you is that you are as much a doer as you are a talker about things, that you're not going to say something if you're not willing to do something. And I've said that about you when you're not sitting here. So the being upset about what's happening is one thing, but you weren't just going to talk about it.
No, I think at that point I had made up my mind, and it's kind of go back to the early days. I put these things in my head like a picture, and then I just go, all right, how am I going to navigate through that? And I had felt like I had an idea of how this was going to go, and if we were going to stay open and do all that. I didn't, you can say unintended consequences. I didn't know what would happen after I said, I'm going to sue the governor. We're not going to close. The only way we are going to close, if a judge says we are, nobody else. And we held that true. And then I started the lawsuit, and then it just exploded to a different level that I never expected, didn't understand, would look, for so many different reasons. I could go on and on. Yeah,
but the idea, it's funny I say funny, I mean ironic, to look back now and think of where we were, what we've learned since then. But the idea that there were conversations about the Phoenix Police Department going and arresting business owners or locking doors of businesses, that was a reality.
It was a reality. And the funny thing is, I say funny, not haha, but we have, I mean, I would say we have the largest contingent of firefighters and police officers that are members. Like,
I know.
We just have always had that. They've been so and a great relationship. And those guys from all departments, from Glendale to Phoenix to Scottsdale, I go with Tempe, all Chandler, all those police departments. It was so interesting because what was going on behind the scenes and what was being pushed on one side isn't what they wanted to do on the other side. And it was amazing. There were some moments that I'll never forget. Because remember, they were going through all the Black Lives Matter protests and all that stuff was happening at the same time. I remember going into Phoenix, one of the main police stations. They were going to write me a ticket, and I said to those guys, all the sergeants would call me and say, "Hey, we're going to write you a ticket," and all these things were happening. I'm like, okay, I don't want you guys to have to come to the club. I don't. Because it was just they were in the
now
news.
It's a spectacle.
It was spectacle, and I didn't want it bad for them. I go, I'll just go in. And I remember going in and walking through and getting high fives from police officers and stuff as they were writing me a ticket, which probably was going to lead to me going to jail. I think I had 19 of them or something like that from the different, that they did unwillingly wanted to do. But it was great to be able to see what they were going through because, I had my stress. Everybody had their stress from COVID to not working. They had another level of stress. The firefighters and the police officers in general, they were at another level of stress, and everything was paled in that. But it was at that point it was on, and then it was a court battle from there.
Can you
and
tell
news
us?
Battle.
Can you tell us how those 19 tickets, or whatever, how did they get resolved?
Oh, they got everything.
Can you talk about that?
I could talk about it a little bit. It got resolved behind. I had great. Udall Shumway represented us, and I had two other law firms, including that was how I got introduced to the Goldwater Institute. It was during that time, and I reached out to go just basically like help. Like, I'm going to do this. Do you have any advice? But through everything, and as everything settled down, we ended up, winning the lawsuit. And what was interesting is I went into the law firm's office one day, and we were on, I think it was on the news every 2 days. Yeah. Every CNN with Como Chris and you name it, Fox, everything you could see. I'm trying to think. What is the British News Network? What I just went.
Okay, yeah.
But I just
BBC.
BBC flew in. Like, it was crazy to do and doing that. I'm like, why is this such a big deal? And learning through that, I think it was interesting to see. Everybody wanted to see the fight, why we stayed open. Nobody cared about the result. Right. The result was we ended up winning. After we ended up winning that, everything kind of got resolved quietly behind the scenes because we won.
And my opinion of what we all went through in that time period is I hope we've learned a lesson. I don't know if we have, but I hope we have in how we treat each other. Because if you wore a mask, there was an opinion. If you didn't wear a mask, there was an opinion. Right. If you got vaccinated, you were one thing. If you didn't, you were the other. And there was this battle about whether you were a good human being or a bad human being. Are you just a blind follower? Are you an individual? And in the end, it was a bunch of people struggling with their own ways of getting through something we'd never been through before. Yeah. Do you think we've learned a lesson in how we handle an unknown situation again? I think so. I hope. All you can do is hope, and then if there is another one, you see how it resolved. But it was really interesting, Mike, is because if you want to talk about a sociological experience, nothing was more than not only COVID, but inside of a fitness center. Because you had everybody in the same mode. They wanted to get healthy, but you had different ways people were traveling to do that. I'm going to work out with a mask. I don't want to have a mask. I don't want to have a mask because of the political nature, not because of this. And all these different things, but everybody was there for the same goal, just to get right? You think about it. You think about a gym. You don't know what anybody's political affiliation is, but you do know that when you're in the gym, people have the same. It's about fitness. It is about personal health and well-being.
Absolutely. And we had it in the masses. Masses. We have, what was it, 115, 120,000 active members in there. So you just imagine what was going on. Back to the staff again, just to be able to manage the personalities, the staff having different personalities in doing that. So how do you deal with that? I think what we had to do is first was listen. And I think that was part of my frustration during the COVID was Arizonans, Americans, people in general are smart. Give us credit for understanding. So give us the information. And I think then we'll deal with it. So I think for us as a team, we just knew we had to listen because both people were going to say their opinions. And sometimes they fought, a lot, argued or what have you. We had to just listen through and then try to work our way through it. In the beginning, when I stood up and did sue, the thing that was unifying, it wasn't about whether it was a Republican or Democrat. It was about your right to your own health, feelings and stuff like that. So there wasn't, I never was a Republican or Democratic hearing from people. It was stand up or don't stand up.
Right.
It was really civil liberties or not.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing. I think there were some really hard lessons that we as Americans learned through that. There's no doubt it has to resonate. I think it resonated a little bit in this, not a little bit, a lot in this past election. People don't forget. And I hope that we learn those lessons going forward because we were able to survive through them. So that's a huge success.
And one of the other things, and I think this will lead into possibly talking a little bit about Goldwater and the Goldwater Institute, is that it's one thing to say individual liberties and individual freedoms. It's another thing to live by it in the sense that I expect you to respect mine, but now that also means I have to respect yours.
That's right.
So my example is, I went through some health issues and I was going to a cardiologist. And when I walked into the cardiologist office, they required I wear a mask. And my first inclination was, why in the, what are we still doing this for? But when I had the conversation with somebody, it was a reasonable conversation of, most of our patients are older. Most of our patients are in that high-risk area. And out of abundance of caution, in respect to them, that's why we're asking people to do it. And I thought just the consideration to not tell me wear one or get out of here was all that mattered, was that we've got a reason we're doing it, whether you agree or disagree. We think we're being reasonable, but we owe you the respect to tell you why we're doing it. That was amazing. It was terrific. And that to me mattered more than anything else.
I think most people are reasonable. Now, when we would go into the club, I know I remember a lot of guys just were not wanting to wear the mask and having it. And for a little bit, I had to get open, and there's some pathways that we had to do. And I would say, I don't agree with it as much as you do. I need you with me for the next 5 days. I promise I'm behind in the trenches. Can you work with me for 5 days? On the 6th day, if there's not a change, take it and throw it. I'm with you, right? And I think those kind of communication strategies with everybody, people were just reasonable. Like, I got you for 5 days.
Right. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, I get it.
So the association with Goldwater, the Goldwater Institute, I've loved those guys forever. I just the debate and the willingness to stand up for people and say that there's individual liberties and we're going to stand up for those people. I've always loved what they've stood for. And to find out that you now have gone this whole path when you talk about where you end up in life, how did you end up with them and why? What's the purpose? Because I know you've jumped in both
I've
feet.
Jumped in, and it's just ironic. Again, I'll go back to that movie again because it just seems like that just keeps me in the thing. I had called Victor Riches, who's the CEO of the Gold, and just literally cold called him and said, "Hey, my name is Tom. I own a club, what have you, and this is what's kind of going on." And had midnight conversations because everything was chaotic and stuff like that, and really started to understand more about what the Goldwater really did. Not just what I was learning during COVID, but in general, since the existence of the Goldwater Institute, and fell in love. That's where I fell in love with the ideals of what they do, and really worked through with them. They didn't represent Mountainside, but they were just really good stewards to giving me information on just civil liberties and case law and stuff like that. And then after everything settled and the dust settled, they reached out and said, "Would you be interested in joining the board?" I'm like, "Are you kidding? This would be like a dream, So for the last couple of years, I have sat on the board of the Goldwater Institute, and to ironically go full circle in this, if it wasn't because of COVID and all those things that happened, my relationship with the governor beforehand, and then obviously during COVID, after COVID, we certainly didn't speak. Ironically, Governor Ducey sits on the board of the Goldwater with us, and that came after me. And part of that was, can you guys sit down and have a conversation? And I think that was amazing because we did. We sat down before they voted to bring him on. I was like, well, maybe I need to leave because maybe this isn't the thing that's going to work out. They go, nope, we think it can work out just fine. Can you guys go sit? And him and I sat and talked, and it was really good to go through what his mindset was and the why, and what mine was and the why. And it was just like two guys just having a conversation, and we at the end shook hands. And I'd probably say we text every 2 weeks. Yeah. And we've been on the board together for a year and a half, 2 years almost now. So it's been an interesting full circle.
But I think that what people that have never been around someone that's a type A business owner just find a way to get it done. And I would say that you and Ducey are similar in that way. Cold Stone Creamery, the things they went through, is that there is also room for other people's opinions. You're going to be hard-headed and headstrong about things in your way, and this is my lane, and this is what I do. And when they conflict, I'm going to fight like hell for what I believe. Mm-hmm. But is there a level of respect in a mutual, I don't want to say combatant, like boxers have a mutual respect after the bout is over? Have you reached a point of mutual respect in that regard of we're going to agree to disagree, but at least I can respect that he came from a good place? Do you think you have that relationship?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. And I think, Governor Ducey's really smart.
Yeah.
He's a good businessman, but I would say he's, trumped, so to speak, but he's just really intelligent and quick on there. I'm more raw, in that. And I think those play good together or not good, depending on the situation and those things. But we were able to sit down as adults and kind of talk through why. Or regrets. And, both of us talked through that. And that kind of lowers the temperature level in the room. And we were able to go, I get it. Okay. I still don't agree. I would do the same, in that, but I understand more. And then you just kind of go forward and go, okay. And that respect level, probably grows. It doesn't mean you have to agree with every decision.
Yeah. And I think it is such a life lesson for where we are in this country that there's always room. When you break down the wall of disagreement, you can still disagree, but that doesn't mean you have to have this disdain for the person across from you. And I think there's a level of maturity there that actually makes the relationship stronger.
It does. I'm lucky. I'm in a real close business group. Two things we learned is, first of all, nobody tells each other what to do. You can't tell another A-type personality what to do. That they'll just fight you more on it. But you can give them shared experiences.
Right.
Through my shared experiences, right? And if we're able to communicate through shared experiences and perceptions of stuff, it allows you to listen differently and take it in and maybe learn more. I think, that's both true for me in my life, but it was something really good. And we were able to, recently we were talking about politics. And that's a dangerous thing before the election, right?
Yeah.
It's not dangerous in the sense that it could blow up the room, right? Everybody can start arguing or being nonsense. And we were able to go through the room of, there's 9 of us, and I think we were 6-3 in that. And everybody had really good, intelligent discussion topics about it. And everybody walked away and went, I got it.
Yeah.
Still going to do whatever, but nobody was throwing blows. For sure.
And you're not trying to convince somebody how wrong they are.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly correct.
So I love this question for you because I'm curious, because I haven't asked you this, even personally. But what's next for you? Because you do not strike me as a person that is going to ride off into the sunset and sip margaritas.
No.
That there's always going to be more for you. What are you doing now that excites you? I know Mountainside Fitness carries on.
It does.
But what is it? What are your challenges now? What are you challenging yourself with? What do you want to still accomplish?
Well, I think the first challenge, I've stepped back my role quite a bit in Mountainside. I've got an unbelievable team and stuff like that. So I think I try to just stay out of the way at this point and look to other directions. I got involved. I was always a little bit involved in politics before, just from like 10,000 feet.
Yeah.
Obviously, COVID allowed to see it differently, just not even because I was involved in politics, because of the politicking that was going on. After that, I got involved in, as we both know, Matt Salmon got involved in his race, and then just kind of was able, and a couple other races to kind of see what politics might look like from a different angle, right? And recently again, and I think it's opened my eyes to what interests me as far as another career, what I think I could be happy in, so to speak, successful in, and how it works. I would say it's taken a while to understand more how it works. I think I have a pretty good understanding of how it works.
So do you think you've got aspirations to run for an office? Is this about helping good people run for offices? Is it both? What does that look like?
I think it's both. I think those plans are being formulated. We've talked about a little bit offline. A little.
Yeah, I don't want you to. I'm just asking.
Yeah, no, I think it's kind of coming down to that. I wanted to see how Arizona treated this election in general, and then America, and then how I felt about it from really not only the national scheme, but in the local elections, and how we just deal, and how did that make me feel as an American and an Arizonan, and then anything from there on, and started to formulate what I might feel the most passionate about, because I think if I don't feel passionate about it, I'm just not going to be successful about it.
But don't you think that a lot of the skills you just talked about of being able to articulate and stand up what you believe in, but also understanding that there's other opinions you have to leave room for, fight like crazy for what you believe in, but walking away with the mutual respect? Because I think we at least have the feeling that there isn't a lot of that mutual respect.
Right. I think what I felt, and what it started to formulate over the last probably 3 or 4 years, is there's a difference between politics and leadership. Mm-hmm. And leadership's kind of like going back to that what is your value when you start a business, right? Leadership is sometimes you can't even define it, right? But we know it when we see it. Mm-hmm. We just know I'll follow that person and I'll just go with that person for whatever that definition is to you. Leadership, I think, starts with being able to see all sides and to bring sides together, not to placate, but to bring them together. And that starts by listening and then not being afraid to say no and doing the right thing. Which
a lot of times people are too afraid of a re-election to stand up and say, we've got to do this because it's the right thing.
That's correct. I think I've been fortunate in my career. I would never need to worry about that. If I ever ran for office, if I do decide to run for office, it's kind of like how I built Mountainside. I have one step, and that might be to be elected. And then the next thing would be get through opening day, you know, and then the next step and start working on that plan. But never anything further than that. I just don't function that way. And that's not a career. I don't think politics should be a career.
Yeah, and I agree. I think most people understand the concept of public service.
That's correct.
And going there to be a servant. We don't always have a lot of people that connect the service part of it with the leadership part of it.
I think that's what I've noticed of people in public service. We talk about police chiefs or something like that. If they lead, the rest will follow, and good things happen on those, whether it's politics or not. And I think that it goes in line. If you're not worried about tomorrow and you're just focusing on today, tomorrow will take care of itself.
Well, and it's the phrase servant leader, and I think a lot of those people, and they conjure up in my mind who those leaders are that I looked at and I thought they're a great leader because what's the old saying is they don't care what you know until they know that you care.
Yeah,
and I think that's a big part of leadership is. If you think you're just going to stand up and tell everybody what you know and they're going to follow you, that's a whole different ballgame from saying I'm invested in all of us succeeding.
Right, because we're not successful, we don't all succeed, right? Arizona's got to succeed. United States America's got to succeed. Not that side, all of us have to succeed. Mm-hmm. For us, Mountainside, we all have to succeed to have a job tomorrow, all the members to succeed. What is your success in your heart rate, your blood pressure?
Yeah.
That is the success of us and the we in that. And, I had somebody that I look up greatly to in business. She runs a big REIT, and she said to me the other day, we're just talking business and leading. She said one of the things she hates to do the most is to say no or to take a stand that she knows people might not like her, but it's the right thing. Mm-hmm. I think there's more of that in leadership than that people that don't want to do that but have to do that, and it's part of the job. And I think leading, whether it's running the state, you're running the state. It's the CEO.
Yeah.
And you have to listen, and you have to say no, and you have to say yes, and realize where the lines are.
Yeah, and it's not just about you and not self-preservation. You've got a lot of people that are counting on your yeses and nos.
The self-preservation is for what the job is entitled, not for the person.
Right.
Right? If you're looking out for yourself, it's going to show. Obviously, we've seen that recently in a lot of different examples and what have you. It's what is the job? What is the goal?
Yeah.
What is the goal? If the goal is to get reelected, that's going to affect the job. It's about the job. In whatever capacity it is.
Well, I know we started this off by me talking about how you kind of make me laugh every time we're around each other, but I really have grown to admire you. There are not a lot of people that have fought the battles you've fought and taken the hits and smile every day. I mean, it can jade people, you know what I mean? And you don't seem like a jaded person to me. You seem like someone that enjoys life, that you look on the bright side, positive side of things, and I don't know how you've maintained that.
Oh, I'm just crazy blessed. Like, I mean, few people can get my life, in the sense where you get a kid that had a great upbringing, great parents, great family, great friends, and then be able to go do something when you're broke and something you love and turn it into something that's been around for 34 years and that's been a part of so many people's lives.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just a fairy tale. And so to get bitter about things that didn't go your way out there, that's part of those hills and stuff we talked about earlier. That's just part of the ride. It's the roller coaster thing. But man, I wouldn't trade any of that for anything.
Well,
I'm
what's cool about it is, the point of the podcast is Arizona specific stories. People that live here or have lived here and that have influenced things here in Arizona. Colangelo's been on the show. We've had some of the people that just iconic Arizona names. Jimmy Walker from Celebrity Fight Night. And I think you're one of them. The Mountainside Fitness brand is uniquely Arizona. And everybody that lives here knows where one is, even if they're not a member. So you are an iconic Arizona brand. And I think that whole story for you moving here when you were a kid and creating that story is very cool. I think that's one of the reasons why we wanted to do the podcast, but I think you are a big piece of the culture here, don't you?
Well, it's hard for me to look at it in that, and I guess in that range. I think it's evolved into that, but truly, Mountainside was built by Arizonans. I mean, literally,
right?
It was built by all the members who've been there and all this the great employees. I mean, it was literally Arizona built. It still is, and Arizona grown. And I think that's the greatest thing. I just was this guy that had an idea, and what have you. The rest, all the water and the seeds and the branches and everything was everybody else. And that's the success, I think, out of everything.
Well, listen, I know you're a busy guy. I appreciate you coming down and telling the story and talking through some of these things. I think people are going to be a lot more this story is going to be a lot more compelling to people than they thought when they started watching, because your story is so interesting. And I think the way you tell it makes it even better. So I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it always. Great to see you.
Now you know why he's an amazing Arizonan. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching Amazing Arizonans, presented by Resolution Copper. Tap the button in the middle to subscribe to KTAR News.